Hi there. Welcome to the second video for our week 2 discussion on the role of theory in LIS. I just wanted to talk to you about some of the readings and about the questions for the first discussion and what I'm looking for in terms of what I want you to focus on. So if I just go into details about discussion number 1, the value of research in LIS, I've left it pretty broad. I've just posed a few different questions for you to ponder. So the intention isn't for you to answer all of these questions, but just to generate some ideas in you about what you wish to discuss. And it's good if you do touch on some of these topics. So go over the readings, start to formulate your own questions and your own thoughts about theory and research in library and information sciences, and then go ahead and create your post. So the discussion topic is about the value of research. Why do we need research? How does research inform our practice? What types of research are most common in the LIS field? And how does theory intersect with practice in library work? So your readings will give you a foundation for being able to ponder those questions, consider those questions, and then prepare a response for it. So just a couple of the readings I wanted to highlight that I didn't do in the last video. There is a reading from Kamasi, if I can just get into the file here, reading by Kamasi and a reading by Yerbury that go into some philosophical, more theoretical discussions about the role of theory in LIS. And Kamasi's research is an exploration into how theory is used in library science scholarly literature. And I had suggested in the last video that we're quite a new discipline as far as creation of our own theory, and as far as thinking more theoretically about research rather than having some sort of practical outcome from doing research. So Kamasi's article talks about how theory has been discussed or applied in LIS research, and then what role theory plays. So we have been, like I said, library and information science research has been a little slower to develop, piggybacking, I guess, as it were, on other more long-term established social science disciplines. So in other words, we borrow theory to help to interpret or explain phenomena in library and information sciences. I wish to just step back for a second and just talk about what exactly theory is. You'll find numerous definitions of the word theory and what that means and why we talk about theory in research. A good definition and also a good resource that you'll want to know about is SAGE research methods. If I go to the U of A library website, I'll show you how to get there if you don't know already. Go to search for databases and then get to the S for SAGE. So SAGE is a publisher, and they have an online database that gives you lots of links to articles and electronic resources and videos, etc. on research. Not exclusive to LIS. This is SAGE research methods in any discipline or any approach to doing research. So you can do a browse feature. It's got some good sort of concepts that you can look into. You can look into a specific discipline. You can look into specific topics, and that's actually really helpful. And it brings up a kind of a concept map of the topic that you've chosen, and then narrower topics, so that you can kind of conceptualize or sort of categorize terminology with research. But there is a fair bit of information and definitions on what theory is. One of the definitions that I found with theory in this database is theory is a term with many meanings. There it is. But broadly speaking, a set of interrelated concepts or ideas relevant to the explanation or interpretation of a particular topic or domain. So it's sort of a way to explain. Another way to think of it is it's a lens in which to view a particular research problem. It's considered to be nomothetic, which means the word nomothetic comes from nomos in the Greek, which means law. And we're concerned mainly with what we share with others, or how theory should be something that is sort of a shared concept, meaning that essentially theory is laws or can be applied to all people. That's the connection. They say that theory has predictive power. So theory can essentially predict, or like I say, form a lens in which to understand. It's something that we can sort of hang our hat onto, that, okay, this is the way it is. Now we're going to approach it with that conceptualization of that problem. I'll just give you an example. In my research, one of the theories that I considered was social identity theory. And social identity theory is a theory about becoming part of different groups and how membership in a group helps to construct your own identity. So it just places a lot of value and emphasis and importance on social groupings in order to, and that is what sort of informs our own identity. And that is said to inform our identity at work. How we relate to other people, what groups that we're in, that helps us to create what we consider to be our identity. So when I did my research, I looked at people's concepts of their work identity through the lens of social identity theory. Okay, so back to Kamasi's article. It shows that the use of theory, in Kamasi's article, it's very interesting. The article shows in their research of a bunch of different studies in LIS research, they looked at how theory was used and talked about in all of those articles, and it ran the gamut from just theory being talked about, basically name dropping of a theory, but not really used or applied in the research, all the way to theory generation or the development of a theory. Ran the gamut, but there was a considerable amount of research in LIS that just really brushed the surface of talking about theory, but not really utilizing that theory, and even less that generated new concepts or new theory or new ways of thinking about something. Kamasi also emphasizes that multiple terms are used which can lead to the confusion of what theory is. We use the word models, we use the word theory, we use the word frameworks, we use the word conceptualizations, and I've used all of those terms too, that talk about this way that we view, the way that we view research and what theory is. So that really raises many questions about what is the difference between these terms. And why does there appear to be so little understanding on academic terminology among LIS researchers? So Kamasi's article really introduced a little bit of a problem, identified a bit of a problem in how theory is used in our research, and the discrepancies in how theory is managed. So is there something that we need to do about this? Is this important? Do we need to have a theory for every study that we do, is the question. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, on the role of theory in library and information science research. Yerbury's article is the second very interesting article that is a bit more philosophical in talking about theory and talking about our research practices, the meaning of research. And Yerbury introduces something called business as usual, meaning that there's a sense of stability in the research that's conducted in library and information sciences. So we don't really push the boundaries of knowledge. we're kind of a little bit stagnant in thinking about things in the same way. We don't challenge what we've discovered, and that we seem to feel that territory is a little bit dangerous to challenge. So we just sort of accept things the way we are. And in some senses in research, that's dangerous, because then when you are analyzing your data, even when you're in the process of data collection and how you structure conducting your research, you can do it in such a way that uh, uh, goes towards answering the question in the way you hope it gets answered, or the way you expect it to be answered, rather than being open to new discoveries. So we tend to be a little fearful of those new discoveries. So there's, as she says, there's no major upsets to our ways of thinking. It's just business as usual. And then Newbery mentions, and it's funny, that when there is an anomaly or some sort of an unexpected outcome or a discovery, that we just assume that it's a flaw to our data collection or to our methodology or a flaw to our interpretation of the data. And we tend to try to make that square peg fit through a round hole and just not accept that it could be anything that is more revolutionary. That's another thing to look for and look out for. I think that's a difficult thing to really evaluate when you're reading an article, but I think the more you read, look at it with a really critical lens, look at it with a critical eye, and think, is this just trying to fit this hypothesis at the beginning of this article? Are they hopeful that they're answering the research question in a certain way, and then everything's sort of guided down that path, or have they kind of broken free of that? But on the good side, in library and information studies, we have a long tradition of recognizing the various ways that knowledge is categorized. Just probably because we draw on so many different disciplines, we are quite broad thinking in the way that we view knowledge. And that's just the nature of our profession too, and how we look at information. So we for example, we don't just consider explicit knowledge, or knowledge that is sort of proven through scientific methods. We accept tacit knowledge. We accept that knowledge can be learned by practice, and we are a practical profession. So what we value and what we even revere, what those in industry say. And research in LIS isn't esoteric in nature. We all sort of have this sense of placing value and importance, and trusting that what happens in practice is something that can advance our knowledge. We can trust that. I hope that makes sense. But so we're all experts to a certain degree, and research, theory, and philosophy are all quite closely intertwined with our practice. For example, the values of librarianship. Values are somewhat theoretical in concept, but yet that informs our practice. So we're pretty good at making that connection between theory and practice. That's how we conduct our profession. That's how we view our profession. Page 25 of this article has a really fascinating description of the tension between empirical research and theorizing. So have a look at that. And Newbery emphasizes near the end of the article that the interesting work really starts to happen at the moment when this business as usual is challenged. So that's what we're really looking for, is that interesting research that challenges business as usual. Okay, those are just some of the things I wanted to point out in these articles. That's just my contribution to the discussion, and I want you to just take it away and go a different direction, go follow this train of thought, do whatever it is that you feel comfortable doing and are interested in doing, and interested in sort of studying, and contribute that in your this week's weekly discussion. So thanks very much for listening.